I wanted to do a while back, but I just never really got around to it, unfortunately. It is going to be for Rugal Bernstein from King of Fighters. Rugal is for those of you who aren't familiar with him, Rugal is the main familiar antagonist. I don't know, he's not really like the main antagonist. He's the most iconic boss, maybe, from King of Fighters. Which isn't really saying much if you don't know about fighting games or anything. There'll be a picture of him on the screen. It'll probably just be a picture because he's only gameplay based. And while there is an animated series called King of Fighters Destiny, which I guess is a retelling of King of Fighters 95, which is the first game, I would rather not risk a copyright strike from SNK or anything of the sort. I don't know how they handle copyright, and how they handle fair use versus, say, other companies. So I'm just not going to risk it. You're just going to get a picture. Now, the main reason I want to do this, how powerful, and is for a versus matchup between Akuma. It's a pretty iconic sort of versus matchup in the fighting community. In fact, it was even done in Capcom versus SNK. The second one, it's also in the first one as well, hinted in the first one, where if you do a specific set of events correctly, the final boss will be either God Rugal or Shin Akuma. I don't know if regular Akuma or regular Rugal show up as the final boss for it. But basically, they fight each other, and whoever wins ends up with the other's power. So, I'm going to do how powerful for Rugal. We've already done how powerful for Akuma, and I think we even revisited it at one point. So, then the next first matchup will be out pretty quickly. So, in terms of physical strength, it's basically just superhuman. It's kind of the standard par for the course of most fighting games, superhuman in terms of physical strength. Speed is where things get a little more complicated. So, the versus map, now I did look into research, and I did find, according to people, the most relevant feats for speed. I'll go through the entire verse at a later date, and actually go through the entire thing. But from what I've gathered, and going through calculations and stuff, Versus Battle Wiki has been massively hypersonic, based on a satellite calculation, where a character reacts to the satellite by going up into the air and then firing the satellite beam back at the satellite. This is a character named Bao. He uses it with his psychic powers. There's another ending where a character, right before the satellite hits the ground, is able to blitz the satellite and then blast it away. And that character is weaker than Rugal. And then there's another that's just assuming it's massively hypersonic. There's a calculation, or there was, I tried to find it for the purposes of this video, but there was a calculation to put it at sub-relativistic. There was nothing wrong with the calculation inherently from what I saw of the comment section on Versus Battle Wiki and the other calculators talking about it. But Versus Battle Wiki's having to swap to a different whole website for forums and shit, so I don't know if that conversation got taken elsewhere. I couldn't find it again. And there was even another sub-relativistic feat where they reacted to Orochi's light, where fighters could react to Orochi's light attack, and these fighters would scale to Rugal. So Rugal's speed, massively hypersonic to sub-relativistic, is somewhere in the area there. Now, whether or not this would only scale to Omega Rugal is up in the air. King of Fighters Destiny, which doesn't appear to have Omega Rugal in it, since Omega Rugal only appears in his next encounter, not the first encounter, does beat the shit out of Kiwi pretty fucking badly, and is actually superior to him for the majority of the fight. I don't think Kiwi trains all that much during the events. I know he does train, but I'm not sure if the gap increase is actually that substantial, similar to other series. So I'll just leave that one up. I'll leave that one up until I do some more research on it. But for sure, that would scale to Omega Rugal. Whether or not that would scale to base Rugal, I believe it would, but we'll see what happens. Moving on, durability. Durability is going to be at around the small city level for base. He blows up his own fucking carrier, and it does blow off his armor and shit. The only reason he survives, according to the games, is because he's able to access because he uses his Orochi powers. So I think the explosion of being capped at around small city level. I think that's how I end up going. At least small city level, according to Versus Battle Wiki, for the powers for Omega Rugal. This is where things get a little more complicated. This depends on how you scale Orochi. So Orochi is a really weird character. Unfortunately, I did not sit down and fully go through Orochi scaling. Again, I'll do this for a separate video. The stats here may or may not change depending on what I just find out there. See, Orochi is either planet level or universal plus, depending on how you want to take his statements and descriptions. If he's universal level plus, even a small portion of his power would be massively higher than small city level, bare minimum. Like if straight up stated to Rugal, because Rugal gains the powers of Orochi, or he gains a small portion of it, they tell him, don't use the full power I've given you, it'll burn you away, and it does. When he uses the full power, it completely destroys him. But even a small portion of a Universal Plus level being is still most likely going to be above planet level, bare minimum, easily. Even if it's just like 1%, you know? Even then, I think 1% of a Universal Plus level being is still like multi-solar system level. So, it really depends on where you scale the powers of Orochi, because that's going to backtrack to Omega Rugal. I'll do a how powerful Orochi in the future, and then give my personal thoughts on where scaling is for King of Fighters with Orochi. From what I understand, there's also some other Universal Plus characters like Ignis, which would just backscale to Rugal better, because that means characters who could fight Rugal and actual Rugal could fight, whatever. I'll save all that shit for when I actually go into the verse more in depth. But for now, we'll just stick with versus Battle Wiki, small city level, at least small city level for both keys of Omega Rugal and regular Rugal. This is, of course, going to extend to his AP as well. Small city level, powers going to other characters. If we take King of Fighters Destiny into account, it does take almost the entire crew to beat Rugal in an actual fight. Okay, so let me rephrase that a little bit. So I did go back and rewatch it and finish it. So Rugal would have beat the actual crew. He would have beat them if they didn't all gang up on him. But in the final portion of the fight, Rugal does gain a power amp. This is not Omega Rugal. Omega Rugal looks different. And Kiwi, the main character, is able to gain a power amp of his own and is able to beat him in a 1v1 at the very end. They are very similar to each other though in power, as it's not just like an easy win for either of them. That being said though, base Rugal would have beat the shit out of all of them had they not gotten involved. Unfortunately, this is for the earliest game from what I understand, and this is not for the later incarnations of Rugal, and Omega Rugal would be stronger by a vast degree as well. So again, AP, we'll just stick with the small city level for both versions of the key as characters, Omega Rugal and base Rugal. At least small city level for Omega Rugal, but that's fine. He does blow himself up, all that jazz. Good stuff. So with that said, we're moving on to powers and abilities now. Since we've gone over strength, speed, durability, raw power. He does get electrocuted in Destiny and is still able to fight immediately afterwards with really no signs of actual damage. Also getting burned and stuff, still fine. So you could argue resistances to lightning and fire, depending on how you want to work that one out, because there's not, at least in Destiny. But unfortunately, so I'm using Destiny because, from what I understand, it's just like a retelling of the first game, adding characters that might not have been there and just explaining more of the lore. But it is officially hosted by SNK, so I think it's fair game to use. Alright, moving on, powers and abilities. Barrier creation, gravity manipulation, elemental manipulation, energy manipulation, power and energy absorption, and power mimicry. Not too many powers for the character. You'll find that fighting game characters really don't have all that many powers and abilities to begin with. However, one thing about the power mimicry that is kind of important, I see versus Battle Wiki put elemental manipulation, but he's able to copy any ability he sees and use it to the same effect as the original character. And one of the abilities he copies is the fire of Kiwi Kusanagi, which is technically not an ability you can use. It's a bloodline-based ability for his family. I understand they can be stolen based on, certain characters, because in, King of Fighters 2003, if I recall correctly, Ash steals Iori's flames. But Rugal's not stealing his flames. Rugal's just straight up copying the flames he saw Kiwi produce, and he can just straight up copy them, no problem. Now, unfortunately, we don't see him copy the Lightning Guy's powers, because if we did, that'd just make it easier to say he can just copy abilities. But more likely than not, Rugal can copy any energy and any substance he sees within reason. What I mean by that is, I don't expect Rugal to be able to have, Dr. Manhattan's ability to warp reality by seeing Dr. Manhattan do it. But if we were to say, if he were to say, look at Kenshiro do a Fist of the North Star technique, or, use, even Muso Tenso, you can make a good argument Rugal could use those abilities immediately after seeing them once. No weapons for his character, as far as I can tell. He has a cybernetic arm, but I don't think it really fucking has anything for Omega Rugal. Pretty high durability. Again, durability is all the same. Endurance, roughly the same as well. The only real weakness the character has, outside being overconfident, is as Omega Rugal, if he uses 100% of the Orochi power he was given, it will completely destroy him. Which is what happens to him in King of Fighters 95, if I'm not mistaken. Might be 96 or 7, but I'm pretty sure it's... No, 95 is the first one, 96 is the second game, so it happens in 96. His energy barrier does reflect attacks that are relatively comparable to it. I say that because in Destiny, Athena's Psycho Ball is able to push Rugal back, but it's not able to actually hurt him. The barrier is still there; it just doesn't reflect it back. So there is that. But other attacks that were no, that seems perfectly fair. It is able to reflect other attacks and physical attacks as well. Yeah, no, that's about it for Rugal. Again, he can't copy any technique he sees just once, and he'll just immediately copy it, no problem. Seems to be no restriction on this one. As far as I can tell, beyond that, there's really nothing else to talk about here. I already mentioned the full power of Orochi and stuff. Omega Rugal is vastly more powerful than base Rugal. Just gonna throw that one out there as well. It is the power of Orochi enhancing him. No real questions there. I'm not going to talk about the other versions of Rugal because these are two canon versions. There is a version of Rugal known as God Rugal that occurs in Capcom vs SNK. This is a Rugal who has absorbed the powers of Akuma and gained the Satsui no Hado along with the powers of Orochi. Pretty straightforward stuff. He does have statements referring to himself as being a god and stuff like that. Whether or not you could actually take that as any sort of power scaling is up in the air. I don't think so personally, because there are characters who are stronger than him, or at the very least stronger than his base form. We don't know how Omega Rugal would have fared against the likes of Gonets and shit. So with that said, ladies and gentlemen, thank you guys for your time as always. Have a nice day. I'll see you guys on the next video, because I'll put a little update here in the comment section about streams going forward. So thank you guys for your time as always, and have a nice day.